It was supposed to be a peaceful evening for the capital city. Bright towers reached for the stars, their crystal surfaces glowing softly under the twin moons. Airships floated lazily through the air, carrying traders, diplomats, and tourists from across the galaxy. Among them was a small human vessel, newly arrived from Earth, piloted by a young cadet named Ethan Cole. Ethan had dreamed of space travel since he was a boy. Being chosen to escort an Earth delegation to Zerathia felt like the start of something big. He had never been to another planet before, and the view of the city from the air filled him with awe. But that wonder didn't last long. The first explosion came from somewhere below, shaking the entire airship. At first, Ethan thought it was an accident, some kind of mechanical failure. But then he saw smoke rising from one of the palace spires. Fire spread quickly across the sky as more explosions followed. The once calm city was now filled with sirens, blaring alarms, and the flashing lights of emergency crafts racing in every direction. "This is bad," Ethan muttered, gripping the controls. A voice crackled through his comm unit. "All visiting ships evacuate immediately. Palace security under attack. Repeat, evacuate immediately." He could have left. In fact, he should have left. But then something caught his eye. Far below, on one of the palace's open balconies, a small figure stood alone. Even from a distance, Ethan could tell it was a child, her pale silver hair glowing in the firelight. Behind her, armed rebels in dark armor were closing in. Ethan didn't think. He acted. Pushing the controls forward, he dove toward the balcony. The ship shuddered from the sudden drop, wind screaming against its hull. The rebels looked up in surprise as the human craft roared closer. Ethan hit the landing struts hard against the balcony floor, swinging open the side hatch. "Come on!" he shouted, waving to the girl. The child hesitated only a second before running toward him. Blaster fire rang out. The rebels were shooting. Ethan jumped out of the cockpit, heart pounding. He grabbed the girl's small hand and pulled her inside the ship. "Hold on tight," he said, closing the hatch. The controls beeped a warning. Something was locking onto his craft. He pulled the ship away from the balcony just as an energy bolt slammed into where they had been seconds earlier. The blast lit up the sky. "Who are they?" Ethan asked as he twisted the ship through the narrow streets, dodging flying debris. The girl's voice was shaky but steady. "Traitors. They want to take the throne." That was when Ethan noticed the royal crest on her robe, a golden star encircled by silver wings. His stomach dropped. This wasn't just any child. "You're the princess," he said slowly. She nodded. "Princess Lyra of Zerathia." Ethan didn't know much about Zerathian politics, but he knew enough to realize this was far more dangerous than he thought. If the rebels wanted the throne, the princess was their main target. "We need to get you somewhere safe," Ethan said. He turned the ship toward the outskirts of the city, weaving through chaotic air traffic. Rebel craft followed, firing bursts of plasma. Ethan's human training kicked in. He didn't fight like a Zerathian pilot. Instead of engaging directly, he used sharp dives and sudden turns, flying dangerously close to buildings so the enemy couldn't get a clear shot. One rebel fighter came too close. Ethan pulled an unexpected move, cutting power for half a second, so his ship dropped suddenly, letting the fighter overshoot. Then he blasted upward, striking the fighter's underbelly with the ship's defensive turret. The rebel craft spun out of control and vanished in a burst of flame. The princess was gripping her seat, wide-eyed. "Humans fly different." "Better," Ethan said with a quick grin. Finally, the city faded behind them, replaced by the dark, rocky hills outside the capital. Ethan set the ship down in a narrow canyon where they would be hidden from scanners. The engines hummed to a stop. For the first time since the attack began, there was silence. The princess sat still, looking at the floor. "They would have taken me," she said quietly. Ethan crouched down so he was at her eye level. "Not while I'm here." She studied him for a moment, her silver eyes bright even in the dim light. "Why did you help me? You don't even know me." Ethan thought about that. He could have said it was his duty. He could have said he was just following instinct. But the truth was simpler. "You were in danger," he said. "That's enough." She seemed to consider his words, then gave a small nod. "Thank you, Ethan of Earth." The night outside was still burning. Somewhere beyond the hills, the palace was under siege. Ethan didn't know what would happen next, whether the rebels would find them or whether the royal guards would come. But one thing was certain. He had pulled this child out of the fire, and he wasn't going to let anything happen to her now. High above, the twin moons drifted apart, casting long shadows over the canyon. The sound of distant engines echoed faintly, reminding Ethan that the danger was far from over. But he tightened his grip on the ship's sidearm and glanced at the princess. "Get some rest," he said. "We'll move at first light." And, deep in the heart of the galaxy, a moment had been set in motion, one that would be remembered not just by a girl with silver hair, but by the stars themselves. 10 years had passed since that night on Zarathia. The galaxy had changed. Empires had risen and fallen, trade routes had shifted, and entire star systems had joined the Galactic Council. But in the quieter corners of space, far from the shining halls of power, Ethan Cole had built a life of his own. Now 28, Ethan was no longer the wide-eyed cadet who had once crash-landed in the middle of a coup. He was a seasoned pilot, a problem solver for hire, and the captain of a small but reliable freighter called the Wayfarer. The ship was old, patched with parts from half a dozen worlds, but it was home. Ethan liked jobs that didn't draw too much attention: transport runs, salvage missions, the occasional rescue operation. He stayed out of politics, especially royal politics. That one night on Zarathia had been enough to last a lifetime, or so he thought. It was during a quiet run through the Charon belt when his ship's comm unit began flashing red. Incoming transmission, Priority 1. Ethan frowned. Priority 1 meant it was either urgent or trouble. He pressed the button, and a holographic seal appeared above the console, a golden star encircled by silver wings. Ethan froze. He had seen that crest before. The message began to play. A calm, formal voice spoke in galactic standard. "Captain Ethan Cole, you are hereby summoned by order of the Royal Court of Zarathia. Your presence is requested at the Celestial Diplomatic Station, orbiting neutral space. Transportation and security will be provided. This is a matter of highest honor." The transmission ended. Ethan leaned back in his chair, staring at the crest. He hadn't heard from Zarathia since that night. He'd never told anyone exactly what had happened, just that he'd been in the wrong place at the right time. "Highest honor," he muttered. That usually means trouble. Still, something inside him was curious. He set the ship's course for the station. The Celestial Diplomatic Station was one of the most famous structures in the galaxy. Shaped like a massive, silver ring with a star-shaped core, it spun slowly against the blackness of space, surrounded by a faint blue energy field. Ships from dozens of worlds were docked there: sleek Zarathian royal cruisers, bulky Targath freighters, and tiny dart-like crafts from the insectoid Kren. When Ethan's freighter approached, a royal escort ship slid into formation beside him. Its smooth, crystal-like hull reflected the light of nearby stars. "Captain Ethan Cole," a voice said over the comm, "you will be escorted to Docking Bay 7. Ethan followed, keeping his hands steady on the controls. The bay's doors opened, revealing a landing area lit by soft white light. Waiting on the platform were guards in silver armor and an attendant dressed in flowing blue robes. The moment Ethan stepped out, the attendant bowed. "Captain Cole, please follow me." They walked through high, gleaming corridors lined with banners from countless worlds. The air smelled faintly of some kind of sweet flower. The further they went, the quieter it became, until they reached a grand hall with a long glass wall looking out into space. At the far end of the hall stood Princess Lyra. She was no longer the frightened child Ethan remembered. Her silver hair now reached her shoulders, shimmering under the light, and her posture carried the quiet confidence of someone who had been trained to lead. She wore a royal robe of deep violet trimmed with silver, and a jeweled pendant rested against her collar. When she saw him, she smiled. "Ethan of Earth," she said, her voice warm. Ethan stopped a few steps away, unsure whether to bow. "Princess." "It has been a long time," she said, studying his face. 10 years, and yet I would know you anywhere." Ethan gave a half smile. "You've grown a little since the last time we met." Her eyes softened. "I remember that night clearly. The fire, the smoke, and you pulling me to safety when no one else could reach me. I have not forgotten." Before Ethan could answer, she gestured for him to walk with her. They moved toward the glass wall, stars drifting silently beyond. "You must be wondering why I called you here," Lyra said. "That thought crossed my mind," Ethan admitted. Lyra's expression became serious. "Zerathia stands at a turning point. My coronation as queen is approaching, and with it comes the duty to choose a bondmate, a partner to stand beside me as we lead the empire." Ethan blinked. "And you called me for—" Her voice was steady. "Because I want that partner to be you." Ethan stopped walking. For a moment, the quiet hum of the station was the only sound. "Me?" "Yes," she said simply. "Not because of politics, not because of obligation, but because you saved me, not for reward, not for gain, but because it was the right thing to do. I have seen many leaders, many warriors, but none I trust as I trust you." Ethan let out a slow breath. "You do realize I'm just a pilot?" Lyra's lips curved in a faint smile. "Just a pilot who outflew armed rebels, evaded palace assassins, and risked his life for someone he barely knew. Tell me, Ethan, how many others can say the same?" He shook his head. "You're talking about making me a royal. That's a big leap from running cargo across backwater planets." Her gaze did not waver. "It is not just a royal I seek. It is someone who understands loyalty, courage, and heart. The throne can be learned. Those qualities cannot." Ethan didn't answer right away. Outside the glass, a comet passed by, trailing silver light, like a slow-moving spark. Finally, he said, "You know this is going to cause trouble. The council, your people, they won't like it." "I am aware," Lyra replied. "But I do not choose for them. I choose for the future." For the first time, Ethan saw the faintest flicker of nervousness in her eyes, quickly hidden, but there. He realized that beneath the royal titles and the formal robes, this was still the same girl he had carried to safety through burning skies, and that made it harder to say no. Before he could respond, a royal guard approached, bowing low. "Your Highness, the council is ready for you." Lyra nodded, then looked back at Ethan. "Think on it. I will have my answer soon." As she walked away, the stars reflected in the polished floor beneath her. Ethan stood there for a long moment, feeling as though the galaxy had just shifted under his feet. He had come expecting a formal thank you. Instead, he had been offered a place at the heart of an empire. And deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. The Grand Council chamber of the Celestial Diplomatic Station was a place built for history. Its ceiling stretched high above like a crystal dome, showing a perfect view of the stars. Delegates from dozens of worlds sat in tiered rows, each wearing the colors of their home system. At the center of the chamber stood a wide circular platform. This was where great announcements were made. Ethan Cole stood just outside the chamber doors, watching the scene from the shadows. He wasn't used to being anywhere near politics, much less the middle of it. He would have preferred to be back on the Wayfarer, checking the ship's engines, but the royal guards had insisted he attend. Beside him, a guard in silver armor leaned closer. "When Her Highness speaks, remain silent until addressed," he said in a low voice. Ethan gave a half smile. "Don't worry. Talking in front of crowds isn't my thing." The guard didn't smile back. Moments later, a fanfare echoed through the chamber, deep notes from a Zarathian horn. The conversations hushed, and the delegates rose to their feet as Princess Lyra entered. She walked with calm confidence, her violet robe flowing behind her, the jeweled pendant at her neck catching the light. Ethan followed at a respectful distance, feeling more than a few eyes on him. Lyra stepped onto the central platform. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," she began, her voice clear and steady. "Today I bring news of personal and political importance, news that will shape the future of Zerathia and our place among the stars." The delegates leaned forward. "My coronation as queen is approaching," she continued, "and with it, the choosing of my bondmate. In Zerathian tradition, this choice is both a personal union and a symbol of alliance." A murmur spread through the chamber. Everyone knew what that meant. Whoever she chose would become one of the most influential figures in the galaxy. Lyra raised her hand for silence. "I have made my choice." She turned, and for a moment her silver eyes locked on Ethan's. "I choose Captain Ethan Cole of Earth." The room erupted. Some delegates spoke in rapid, heated tones. Others stared in shock. A few simply shook their heads. Ethan could feel the weight of every gaze on him now. From the far side of the chamber, a tall alien with pale blue skin stood. His voice was cold. "A human? From an unaligned world? Your Highness, this is highly irregular." Another delegate, a reptilian figure draped in gold chains, hissed, "Unacceptable! The royal bond is sacred. This outsider cannot carry the legacy of Zerathia." Lyra's voice cut through the noise. "It is not his species that matters. It is his actions. 10 years ago, when our capital burned and rebels sought to end the royal line, Ethan Cole risked his life to save mine. He asked for nothing in return. Since that day, I have known he carries the qualities that truly matter: loyalty, courage, and a sense of justice that cannot be bought." Some of the delegates grew quiet, but not all. A Zerathian elder with a long silver beard leaned on his staff. "Your Highness, our traditions demand that any bondmate to the crown prove themselves worthy through the trials of the 9 worlds. If you insist on this choice, he must be tested." Lyra inclined her head. "I expected as much." She turned to Ethan. "Do you accept the challenge?" Ethan hesitated. The entire chamber was staring at him. Every instinct told him to say no, to walk away, to get back to his ship and vanish into the quieter parts of the galaxy. But then he saw the look in Lyra's eyes. Not a command, not an expectation, but trust. He straightened his shoulders. "Yeah," he said simply, "I accept." The elder struck his staff on the floor. "So it shall be. The trials begin in 3 cycles. Prepare yourself, human." Later, in a quieter council lounge, Ethan sat across from Lyra at a small table. Beyond the window, ships drifted in and out of the station's docks. "You didn't have to do that," Ethan said, leaning back in his chair. "Yes," Lyra replied, "I did. If I choose you without the trials, the council will never accept it. If you pass them, no one can deny your worth." Ethan sighed. "You make it sound simple. What exactly are these trials?" "They are not simple," Lyra admitted. "The 9 worlds each present a different challenge, some of strength, some of wisdom, some of heart. Many have failed." "That's reassuring," Ethan said dryly. Her smile was faint but genuine. "You will not face them alone. I will advise you where I can. but the final test is always yours to complete. Ethan studied her for a moment. Why me, Lyra? Really? She met his gaze without hesitation. Because you remind me of the person I want to be as a ruler. Someone who acts not out of duty or gain, but because it is right. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The quiet hum of the station filled the air. Finally, Ethan said, All right, I'll do it. But when this is over, and if I survive, you're going to owe me a very long vacation. Her laugh was soft, but warm. Agreed. Word of the princess's choice spread quickly through the station, carried on whispers and data streams. Some called it a bold move, others a dangerous gamble. In the darker corners of the docks, shadows stirred. Figures who saw Ethan not as a hero, but as an obstacle to be removed. In one such corner, a cloaked figure spoke quietly into a calm. The human will not survive the trials, the voice said. But we will not wait for them to take him. Prepare the first strike. Far above, unaware of the danger closing in, Ethan stood on a balcony overlooking the stars. Somewhere out there, 9 worlds waited for him, each holding a test that could make or break not just his future, but Lyra's as well. And in the silent glow of the galaxy, he wondered if saving her once had been the easy part. The corridors of the Celestial Diplomatic Station were quiet at night. Most of the traders had returned to their ships, the council chambers were empty, and the sound of soft air vents was the only thing breaking the stillness. But for Ethan Cole, sleep refused to come. He stood in his quarters, looking out through the wide window into the blackness of space. His mind kept turning over the same thoughts, the 9 trials, the whispers of disapproval from the council, and the unmistakable feeling that his presence here was putting a target on his back. And he was right. Far from the royal quarters, in a hidden maintenance bay, 3 figures in dark cloaks stood around a small holomap of the station. Their faces were covered, their voices low. The human is dangerous, one of them said. If he wins the trials, the princess will crown him. That cannot be allowed. Another tapped a finger on the holomap. He is not under constant guard yet. Tonight, we end it quietly. The third figure's voice was cold. Make it look like an accident. We cannot risk the princess knowing it was us. Back in his quarters, Ethan poured himself a cup of the station's version of coffee. A dark, bitter drink that smelled faintly like mint. He had just taken a sip when the faintest sound reached his ears. A soft click. It wasn't much, but years of flying through dangerous sectors had trained Ethan to notice things like that. He set the cup down quietly and moved to the side of the window. A shadow moved along the far wall. Ethan's heart rate slowed, not from fear, but focus. He scanned the room quickly. His sidearm was on the desk, too far to grab without being seen. The only other thing close at hand was a small metal tray from his meal earlier. The shadow came closer. Ethan stayed perfectly still until the figure was nearly at his back. Then he spun, swinging the tray hard. The impact knocked the intruder's weapon to the floor with a sharp clatter. The figure lunged, but Ethan sidestepped, grabbing the attacker's arm and twisting. The move wasn't graceful, but it forced the intruder to the ground. That's when the second attacker burst through the door. Ethan grabbed the first attacker's fallen weapon, a slim, needle-like device, and hurled it at the newcomer. It didn't hit directly, but it distracted the second attacker long enough for Ethan to slam the door controls, sealing them inside. The first attacker broke free and charged again. Ethan ducked low, driving a shoulder into the figure's middle, sending them crashing into the desk. The room's comm unit sparked from the impact, casting brief blue flashes. Before the attackers could regroup, the door burst open again, this time to reveal 2 royal guards in silver armor. The attackers fled toward the maintenance corridors, vanishing into the shadows before they could be caught. "Are you hurt, Captain?" one guard asked, scanning the room. "Just lost a cup of coffee," Ethan said, brushing himself off. The guards exchanged glances. "We will increase your protection," one said. Until the trials begin, you must not leave the royal sector without escort. Ethan nodded, though he knew extra guards would not stop determined enemies. Whoever wanted him gone wasn't going to give up that easily. The next day, Lyra called for him in the royal garden, a place unlike any other on the station. Large, transparent panels curved overhead, letting sunlight from artificial projectors shine down on green trees and bright flowers imported from a dozen worlds. She was standing near a small fountain when Ethan arrived. "I heard about last night," she said, her expression tense. "Yeah," Ethan replied. "Someone tried to make sure I don't make it to the trials." Lyra's hands tightened at her sides. "I will find out who is behind it." Ethan shook his head. "You've got bigger things to focus on, like ruling an empire. I can handle a few shadows." Her eyes softened, but there was still steel in her voice. "Ethan, this is not just about you. If they succeed in harming you, it weakens me. That is why you must be careful." He smiled faintly. "Careful isn't really my style. But I'll make it to the trials. You have my word." Later that afternoon, Ethan decided to take a walk through the lower sectors of the station, against the advice of the guards, but with two of them trailing him closely. He wanted to see the kind of people who lived and worked here, far from the council chambers. The markets were alive with color and sound. Merchants shouted over each other to sell glowing fabrics, strange fruits, and small mechanical pets that chirped in metallic tones. Ethan noticed a few curious glances his way. Being the human who had caught the princess's attention had made him a minor celebrity already. As he passed a stall selling star maps, a loud crash echoed from a side corridor. The guards moved instantly, stepping between Ethan and the noise. A cargo loader had accidentally toppled, spilling heavy crates into the walkway, right where Ethan had been about to pass. The timing was too perfect to be a coincidence. Ethan crouched beside one of the crates. The control panel on the loader had been tampered with, wires pulled loose, settings overridden. He stood, glancing at the guards. 2 attempts in 2 days, he said quietly. They're getting creative. That night, Ethan stayed in the training hall long after the lights dimmed. He practiced with the station's simulation systems, flying through asteroid belts, navigating hostile atmospheres, and fighting off enemy ships. The trials were coming, and if someone was trying this hard to stop him, then passing them might be even harder than he thought. When he finally returned to his quarters, he found a small package waiting on his desk. Inside was a simple silver pendant shaped like a star within a circle. There was no note, but Ethan knew who had sent it. He held it for a moment, the cool metal pressing into his palm. It was a quiet reminder that he wasn't just fighting for himself now. He was fighting for someone who believed in him, someone worth protecting. And somewhere in the deep shadows of the station, the people who wanted him gone were already planning their next move. The council chamber had been transformed into a viewing hall. A massive holographic sphere floated above the center, showing live feeds from the trials as they happened on distant worlds. Delegates from across the galaxy had gathered to watch. Ethan Cole stood on the departure platform, wearing a light combat suit and carrying a small pack of supplies. He had no royal armor, no ceremonial weapons, just the tools he trusted and his own instincts. Beside him, Princess Lyra stood with a steady gaze. "Remember," she said quietly, "each trial is different. Strength will help you in some, but in others, only your mind and heart will carry you through." Ethan gave a small smile. "Guess we'll see how far stubbornness gets me." A voice from the platform's speakers called out, "First trial, Gorath Prime." Trial 1. Gravity of Stone Gorath Prime was a world of crushing gravity, nearly twice that of Earth's. The air was heavy, the sky a dull red, and jagged stone cliffs rose in every direction. Ethan's challenge was simple in words. Carry a ceremonial orb from one end of the canyon to the other before sunset. But in the high gravity, every step felt like dragging chains. Zarathian competitors moved slowly, straining with each motion. Some collapsed halfway. Ethan, used to Earth's lower gravity, adapted quickly. He bent his knees, kept his steps short, and leaned forward like a mountain climber. Instead of fighting the gravity, he worked with it, rolling the orb ahead of him whenever he could, conserving energy. By the time the sun dipped below the cliffs, Ethan was the only one still moving. He crossed the finish line just before darkness fell. The council murmured in surprise. Few expected the human to finish the first trial at all. Trial 2, the Silent Bridge of Corin. The second trial took place high above the forests of Corin 5, on a narrow crystal bridge that stretched between two cliffs. The bridge was unstable. One wrong step, and it would shatter. Competitors were told only one rule: cross without making a sound. Most tried to tiptoe carefully, but the bridge creaked and cracked under their feet. Several fell, caught only by safety harnesses. Ethan paused before stepping on. He listened. The bridge groaned in certain spots but was silent in others. Instead of rushing, he mapped the sound in his head, moving only where the glass stayed quiet. His progress was slow, but every step was sure. When he reached the other side, the judges looked impressed. A Zarathian commentator whispered, "He listens more than he speaks. That may be his strength." Trial 3. The fires of Dravana's surface was a sea of black rock and glowing lava rivers. The trial was to retrieve a shard of volcanic crystal from deep within a cave, then return it intact. Competitors wore heat-resistant suits, but the air shimmered with dangerous heat. Many tried to rush, only to exhaust themselves. Ethan took his time, using short bursts of movement and stopping in shaded spots to let his suit cool. He remembered survival training back on Earth. Pace yourself or burn out. Inside the cave, he found the crystal lodged in a wall. Instead of forcing it out and risking a crack, he used a small multi-tool from his pack to chip the stone around it. He returned with the crystal flawless. Trials 4 to 8. The next trials tested different parts of him. On Virella, a water world, he built a floating raft from nothing but plant fibers and driftwood to cross a stormy lagoon. On Thalrek's moon, he solved a moving puzzle of light and shadow that baffled even the most educated competitors. On Sharek, he guided a lost alien child back to the village through a maze of shifting sands, gaining points for compassion. On Kelnor Station, he outnegotiated two rival factions over resource rights without raising his voice once. On Ivara, a dense jungle planet, he found the fastest route through by following bird flight patterns instead of cutting a path. Each time, Ethan didn't overpower the challenge. He outthought it, and each time the council's opinion of him shifted a little more. Trial 9. The Heart of Zarathia. The final trial was the most mysterious. It took place not on a distant world, but on Zarathia itself, in the Hall of Echoes, a vast chamber filled with tall crystal pillars. The challenge was never explained beforehand. When Ethan entered, the doors closed behind him. The air was still, and the crystals glowed faintly. Then a soft voice filled the room. Not from any one place, but from all around. "What do you seek, Ethan of Earth?" Ethan frowned. "If this is some kind of trick question," the voice interrupted. "There is no trick, only truth. What do you seek?" He thought about the throne, the crown, the political power. But none of that had been what brought him here. "I seek to protect someone who matters to me," he said finally. "Someone who believes I can make a difference." The crystals pulsed brighter. "And if protecting her meant giving up everything else, your freedom, your life, would you still do it?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "Yes." Silence followed. Then, slowly, the glow of the crystals deepened into a warm gold. The chamber doors opened, and Lyra stood waiting. Her eyes shone as she stepped forward. "You have passed." When they returned to the council, the hall was silent for a moment. Then the elder with the silver beard stood and spoke. "The human has completed all 9 trials. He has shown strength, wisdom, and heart. By our law, he is worthy." Some delegates still looked unhappy, but none could argue. As Ethan stood beside Lyra on the central platform, he realized he had done more than just pass the trials. He had changed minds. Not all, but enough. In the shadows of the hall, however, the same cloaked figures from before were watching. Their leader's voice was a whisper only they could hear. Let him have his victory. Soon, it will mean nothing. The sun of Varelia was setting, casting golden light across the city's crystal towers. Nathan stood on the balcony of the royal palace, watching the alien sky. The air smelled faintly of sweet flowers that grew only here. In the distance, the sound of the ocean waves reached his ears, soft and calm. But inside his heart, a storm was building. For days, the council had been arguing. Some of the elders wanted Nathan to stay and become part of Varelia's royal family. Others believed a human should not have such influence over their future. But for Lyra, the choice was clear. She wanted Nathan by her side, not as a political symbol, but as the man who had saved her life so many years ago. Nathan leaned on the railing, thinking about his home back on Earth. He had left so much behind, his small apartment, his friends, his quiet life. But the truth was, none of those things had ever made him feel alive the way Lyra did. He heard soft footsteps behind him. "You are thinking again," Lyra's voice said gently. Nathan turned. She stood there, wearing a simple white dress instead of her royal armor. Her silver hair caught the sunlight, glowing softly. "I guess I am," Nathan admitted. "This is a big decision." Lyra stepped closer, her eyes warm but steady. "I will not force you. If you choose to return to Earth, I will not stop you. But if you choose to stay, you will never walk alone here." Nathan smiled faintly. "You know, when I first met you, you were this tiny kid with scraped knees, trying to look brave in front of soldiers twice your size. And you were the strange human who jumped between me and a monster," she said with a soft laugh. "We both have changed." They stood in silence for a moment, listening to the wind. Nathan thought about all the dangers they had faced together, the kidnappers, the council's suspicion, the war brewing between their worlds. And yet, despite all that, he felt safer with her than anywhere else. Suddenly, the doors to the balcony burst open. General Kale stepped out, his face grim. "Your Highness," he said to Lyra, "the enemy fleet is approaching the outer defense line. They are demanding the surrender of the human." Nathan's stomach tightened. "Me?" Kale nodded. "They believe you hold information that could threaten their plans. They want you as a bargaining chip." Lyra's eyes hardened. "They will not take you. Not while I breathe." Nathan knew what she meant. She was ready to risk everything for him. But he also knew what war could do. He had seen enough destruction to last a lifetime. "Maybe I should go," he said quietly. "If it stops them from attacking—" "No!" Lyra's voice was sharp. "You are not their prize. You are my friend. My—" She stopped, her voice catching. Kale looked between them. "We do not have much time. The council will meet in minutes to decide our next move." Nathan felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. If he stayed, the enemy might attack. If he left, Lyra would be heartbroken, and Varelia might lose the alliance they needed. When they entered the council chamber, all eyes turned to them. The elders sat in a circle, their robes flowing like water. One of them, Elder Theron, spoke first. "Human Nathan, Will you surrender yourself to the enemy or remain under our protection? Nathan took a deep breath. I will remain, he said firmly. Gasps filled the room. If they attack, I will fight beside you. I'm not just some outsider who wandered into your world. I'm part of it now. Lyra's eyes softened. The elders whispered among themselves, surprised by his courage. Cale broke the silence. Then we prepare for battle. The hours that followed were a blur. The city's shields were raised and soldiers lined the walls. Nathan stood with the defenders armed with a plasma rifle Cale had given him. The alien sky darkened as the HFY enemy fleet appeared, their ships like black knives cutting through the clouds. Lyra stood at the front, her voice carrying over the soldiers. Today we fight for our home, and we fight for those who stand with us no matter their origin. Her eyes met Nathan's briefly, and he felt a surge of strength. The battle began with a roar of engines and beams of light. Nathan fired alongside the Virelians, moving with quick precision. Ships exploded above, raining fire, but the city's shields held. Lyra's commands kept the soldiers steady, and Cale's strategy slowly pushed the enemy back. Then Nathan saw an enemy ship breaking through the shield's weak point. It was heading straight for the palace. Without thinking, he sprinted toward it. Climbing a defense turret, he aimed at the ship's engines and fired. The blast tore through its hull, sending it spiraling into the sea. When the enemy finally retreated, the city erupted in cheers. Nathan, exhausted and covered in dust, saw Lyra running toward him. She threw her arms around him, not caring about the watching crowd. You stayed, she whispered. I told you, he said, smiling. I'm part of this now. That night, under the starlit sky, the council gathered again. Elder Theron spoke. Nathan, you have proven your loyalty. If you wish, you may stay in Virelia as a protector and as part of the royal family. Nathan looked at Lyra. Her eyes shone with hope, but she didn't pressure him. This was his choice. He thought about his small apartment on Earth, the quiet streets, the ordinary days. Then he thought about Virelia, the alien sunsets, the battles, the laughter, and the woman who had stood beside him through everything. I'll stay, he said finally. Lyra smiled, and for the first time in years, Nathan felt truly at home. Two worlds had almost gone to war, but because of one choice, they now had a future together. And somewhere deep inside, Nathan knew, saving her as a child had changed both their lives forever.